Welcome everybody to our first Daniel Plan Support Group live event. We're going today be having a special guest, one of our admins, Catherine Sheehan. Kathy's going to be showing us how to incorporate cultured food into our diet. And Kathy is in Maine. And I would love for you to just enjoy this wonderful demonstration that she's going to give us today for showing us how to do two things. I won't spoil you which one she's going to show. And with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Kathy. Kathy, take over.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Today, I'm going to talk about the two, I would say, superpowers of fermented foods, and that is kefir and sauerkraut. And I've been making fermented foods now for, about 3.5 years. And I eat fermented food every single day. And I admit that even though I did the diet change and I lost the weight and I was doing very well, the last piece of the puzzle was adding fermented food to my diet. And the reason is people with chronic illnesses, or if they are overweight, if they have type 2 diabetes, IBS, Crohn's disease, depression, anxiety, their microbiome chronic illnesses, or if they are overweight, if they have type 2 diabetes. And what I want to teach you today how to make kefir, which is, I say, the #1 superfood when it comes to fermented foods. And they're made a special way using what are called kefir grains. And I have here, I set this up last night, there are kefir grains in here with dairy milk. And what I did is I put the grains in the milk, and you can see, I don't know if you can see that, but it's beginning to show pockets. Here you can see a pocket of the whey. It's beginning to separate kefir and whey. And actually, this is about ready. So I'm going to strain this so that I can show you what the kefir grains look like. And first thing I do, because the grains usually float to the top, is I do stir it to kind of loosen them from the sides and the bottom because they kind of settle. And then you're going to take an ordinary strainer and put it over a bowl and pour the kefir and the kefir grains into your strainer. It's a little thick, so to get it to go through, you want the kefir to drop to your bowl. You kind of stir it around, and the kefir will drop to the bowl. You can see that happening. And then the kefir grains actually stay in the strainer. And the way to get the last bit of kefir off is actually tap. Until you'll notice when they just start jumping around. And this is what they look like. I don't know if you can see that. They look like cottage cheese. And now to make the next, what I can do here is this kefir in the bowl is ready to drink. I can put it in a jar, put it in the refrigerator, and use it for smoothies. I can use it in recipes. I make a really awesome Thousand Island dressing that uses this as a base. But what I want to do next is, when I want to make my next batch of kefir, I'm going to take my kefir grains and I'm going to put them, you can even use the same jar over and over when you make a batch several times before you have to wash it. And the reason is that's a good idea even, is because the stuff that's on the side are actually small bits of the microorganisms, the probiotic microorganisms, so they're going to help the next batch culture. So the kinds of milk that you can use to make kefir are, I would say, whole milk, organic, but you want it, you can have it pasteurized, but you don't want it ultra pasteurized. And actually that's a little hard to find, at least where I live. They do have organic milk that's pasteurized, but not ultra pasteurized at Trader Joe's, and that's where I get some. And also this brand, this is a brand that I get at Whole Foods. It's called grass milk. It's organic, whole milk. it's pasteurized, but it's not homogenized. So there's actually cream on the top, and you have to shake it. So this is one type of milk that I use. But actually, my favorite type of milk for making kefir is raw milk. And I'm lucky in the state of Maine, I can buy raw milk, not at the regular grocery store, but at natural food stores. It kind of varies from state to state. Your state you might be able to get it at natural food stores. If not, you can go directly to the dairy, but it's not necessary. But this one, I'm gonna shake it up because I'm ready to make my next batch. So I have my kefir grains in my jar. And when you're using raw milk, you need to consume it within 10 days of the milking. The wonderful thing about kefir, though, is that once you've cultured it, it's good for at least a month in the refrigerator. So I'm going to pour this. I have about 1 tablespoon of the kefir grains for every cup of milk. So if you are someone who buys the kefir grains and they only send you a tablespoon, start with a cup of milk. They will grow. They will have babies. And the next thing you know, you will have so many kefir grains, you will be giving them away to all your friends. I practically stand out on the street corner just handing them out. But if you have so many that you can't deal with, you can put them in smoothies. You can give them to your dog. My dog gets kefir every single day. So this one's ready to go, and all I have to do now is put it on the counter for about 24 hours. If you're using a smaller volume of milk, it may only take about 12 hours. What you're looking for is those little pockets of whey. Now I'm going to show you one here that has been sitting out overnight. It hasn't been 24 hours yet, but you can start to see the pockets. It's starting to separate right there. But it hasn't down below. The kefir grains have floated to the top. Now in Russia, in the tents, when this is where all this started in the Caucasus Mountains, they would hang a skin with the kefir next to the front door, and when they would walk in, they'd knock against it. So to do that, first I'm going to burp it, just to make sure there's no gas that has built up, because as the microorganisms eat, just like all animals, they release gas. So I'm just going to take it and I'm just going to mix it. And I can see that it's thick on the top, but not quite yet ready on the bottom. In a few more hours, this one's going to be ready. And I'll strain the kefir grains out of it, and then I will bottle it up and put it in my refrigerator. So there, I'm setting this aside. There are going to be some handouts. We've already downloaded them into the files section. And one of them is all about kefir, the history of kefir, the probiotic microorganisms that are in kefir, and the health benefits of kefir. What I just went through is going to be on this one, called Instructions for Making Milk Kefir. And you can even see the pictures where this is correct, this is ready to be strained. This one, there's nothing wrong with it. It has separated completely into kefir and whey. That doesn't mean that it's bad. As a matter of fact, it's good. It's just is going to be a little more sour because the microorganisms have eaten out all the lactose. And so that is, that's fine. You would just stir it up. You might want to mix it later on with a batch that isn't quite as sour, but you can always flavor it. And on the back, and then there's one more that another handout that you'll be able to download is how to make kefir out of non-dairy milks. It's a little bit different, but you can use those kefir grains to make non-dairy, like coconut milk or almond milk. For many months, actually years, I've been making coconut milk between batches. The kefir grains must be in lactose. That's their food. So if you take them out of lactose for too long, they start weakening. So if you want to make kefir out of, say, coconut milk, you would have to add a little bit of sugar. I put about a half a teaspoon of maple syrup into the non-dairy milk, stir it up, put the kefir grains in there, and it will ferment just like the milk kefir. The only difference is during the process of culturing, it will separate completely. The water and the milk will separate. That will not indicate to you when it's ready. You'll have to actually taste it. One thing you never ever want to do with your kefir grains is to rinse them in water. If you noticed when I showed you, they looked like cottage cheese. They have a gelatinous coating around them, which is their environment. So if you were to strip that, you are going to weaken and open your kefir grains up to bacteria growth and making them thick. Yeah, old, and they won't work very well. And not only that, they won't make good kefir. So if you needed to rinse the rest of the dairy, if you were very, very sensitive to dairy and wanted to make non-dairy kefir, you would use the milk that you were going to use, like coconut milk. Put the kefir grains in the strainer, pour the coconut milk over them to release the rest of or most of the dairy, and then you would proceed. Okay? I hope that makes sense.
Catherine, I have a question for you.
Sure.
I noticed that you're using plastic lids for all of your ball jars. Can you talk to that?
The kefir is slightly acidic, and so I don't want them to react to the metal. And you can buy these plastic lids I buy them at Walmart, any place where you have canning. I also do recommend these wide mouth jars. I buy them by the dozen. Because, well, they're really, really handy. They're easy to clean. Put them into the dishwasher so they can become sterilized between batches.
Right.
So that was a good question. One thing that you can do is, because it's really like a beverage, this is one that's ready to go and drink. This is what I made my smoothie out this morning, and this is all that's left of my last batch. You can take this and strain the whey out of it to make what is called kefir cheese. And it actually has the consistency of Greek yogurt. And what I have here is just a little jar. And you can use a strainer. I happen to be using the funnel for canning because I like the way it takes up so little space in my refrigerator instead of this big handle sticking out across a bowl. You're going to put 2 layers of coffee filters, and you will pour your kefir, your prepared kefir, after the grains have been taken out. You can pour it into the coffee filter and put it in your refrigerator, and slowly the whey will drip into the jar, and what's left on the top is very thick kefir. You can eat it like yogurt or use it in recipes. I want to tell you, I didn't bring them over, but I can run and get them in my bookshelf. There are 2 books. There's an author I highly recommend, and that her name is Donna Schwenk. She has written 3 books. I own 2 of them. One is called Cultured Food for Life and Cultured Food for Health. And she's written another one called Fermented Food in a Jar. That's her latest one. And her last name is Schwenk. And on the handouts, on one of the handouts, if you look at the bottom of one of the pages, it's on the page where it's talking about sauerkraut, if you turn it over, her website is one of the resources that I highly recommend. Hers is called culturedfoodlife.com. The other one that I recommend is culturesforhealth.com. And on either of those websites, there are tutorials. You can buy the materials that you need. Where do you get these kefir grains? That's a good question. You can get them online. I actually got mine from eBay from somebody who lived the next state over, and they sent them to me in the mail. You can also buy them from either one of those websites. They'll be, it looks like a powder, but you would activate them in milk, and then they would grow into the kefir grains. So you can get them already dried.
Catherine?
Right? Yes.
Quick question for you about the kefir grains themselves. The cultured grains that come from non-hydrated or freeze-dried grains, those can't be used as activated kefir grains past 7 ferments, correct?
No, yes, they can. If you get the grains that look like mine,
Yeah.
like little globbies, they'll last forever. I've had these for 3.5 years. I have shared them with all my friends and family, and they keep growing.
So they started out as a live culture, or they started out as a dehydrated culture?
You know, I don't know where mine started. Sometimes because people share these, they may have gotten it from someone else who then they grew extras, and you can actually send them through the mail. There is a
and it was my impression from reading Donna's book that you highly recommended a couple weeks ago that the rehydration packets that you can buy, a package of 6, those will only last through about 7 ferments.
Right. That is powder. That's a kefir starter. That's different than kefir grains. Those kefir starter powders,
that's what I want.
You can even get them at Whole Foods. I've seen them at Whole Foods.
Right.
In the refrigerated dairy section, you'll see them up at the top in a box. Those you're right, can only be used for 7 times, and then you have to start with new powder.
Right.
I had the directions in the one of my handouts talks about that.
Okay.
And it talks about how to use grains or powders. All right. So
now talk about the benefits of kefir, because they're phenomenal.
Well, this is a good time to talk about it, because the next thing I want to talk about is yogurt. We think of another cultured dairy product is yogurt, and I'm not going to go extensively into yogurt, but I happen to have a type of yogurt which uses an heirloom strain that I got on culturesforhealth.com, and the kind that I use is called Filmjölk, Filmjolk. It's an heirloom strain from Sweden. And you don't need to heat the milk beforehand. And I want to show you how easy that is. I have here, this is some yogurt that I made the other day. And to make my next batch of yogurt, I've got another little container here that has about 1.5 cups of milk. So the same ratio, 1 tablespoon. 1 tablespoon of yogurt for each cup of milk you're going to put in. I'm going to take that and just put it into my new jar. Okay? I will eat the rest of this. And now I'm going to add milk to it. Where's mine? There's my milk. You can use pasteurized milk. You can use the raw milk. And I'm just going to fill this up. This is all you have to do with this particular type of strain. I'm going to stir it. Put the lid on it. And this is going to be ready in about 8 hours to 12 hours. I just put it on the counter. That's it. And when it's ready, so you can see in this one, if I tilt it, it looks like liquid in a jar, right? You can see it's coating the side of the jar. You can tell it's ready when you tip it and it pulls away from the jar. That's how you know the yogurt is ready. And to that, you can eat it as it is, and you can see that it is a little more watery than Greek yogurt, but you can turn this into Greek yogurt by using a fine mesh strainer. Now, the strainer I was using to do my kefir grains, it is just a regular strainer. I have here what is known as a fine mesh strainer. I don't know if you can see that, but the holes are so tiny. You can use this to strain your yogurt, or I have a little tool that I got. It's a Greek yogurt maker that has a fine mesh strainer in it. I got it on Amazon, and I put my yogurt in there and I let it strain overnight. The whey drops to the bottom. There's liquid whey in there. And what's left is nice, thick Greek yogurt. But we're going to get more into yogurt later. The difference between yogurt and kefir is that yogurt, Donna Schwenk described it as right turning bacteria. Those are transient bacteria. The microorganisms do not set up a colony in your intestines. So after 2 days, maybe a couple of weeks, they're eliminated. In the case of kefir though, and also this has far fewer strains. If you buy yogurt at the store, you'll notice at the bottom underneath the list of ingredients, they'll tell you what strains are in it. And usually there's 2 to 5. And if you make your own yogurt, there's around 10 to 12 strains. So more strains. So it's more beneficial to make your own. Kefir, on the other hand, instead of just a few strains, if you buy it at the store already made, there are brands like Lifeway is a brand. They have about 12 strains. If you make your own kefir, there's 36 to 56 strains. But not only that, they're called left-turning bacteria. And they actually set up a colony in your intestines. They help you digest your food. They help you to extract more nutrients from your food. And not only that, if you have a problem with lactose, say for example, in the kefir itself is lactase, which is the enzyme that helps you to digest dairy. I used to be very sensitive to dairy. And now, praise the Lord, I can eat my cheese, but I do stay with cultured dairy. I don't usually drink milk out of a carton. I don't do that. But now I can tolerate dairy just fine because the lactase that I need is in the food itself. Does that answer your question?
Beautifully. Thank you.
Great. Now we are ready to go on to talk about the second powerhouse of fermented foods, and that is sauerkraut. And beforehand, I shredded a medium-sized cabbage, just green cabbage. It can be organic, but it's not on the Dirty Dozen list, so sometimes I don't worry about it. The good bacteria actually help to break down if there are any pesticides. Donna Schwenk has told us that's the case. And after I shredded it in my food processor using a shredding blade, not the slicing blade, excuse me, the slicing blade, not the shredding blade. You don't want the pieces to be so tiny, like if you were making coleslaw. You can also use a rotary spiralizer with the slicing blade, and it does a beautiful job. And you can see the pieces, you want them to be kind of long and somewhat big, but not too big. And what I've added to this is amazing, is that really to make sauerkraut, all you need is cabbage and salt. And I use pink Himalayan salt because it does have some trace minerals in it. You can use just plain old pickling salt if you want, but that has just sodium chloride. It's not as beneficial. You can use Celtic sea salt. There's Redmond's real salt, which is out of Utah, that has the trace minerals in it. I got actually 2 of these. This is a 1 pound. I got 2 of these for $10. They came as a set on Amazon. That's very affordable. Very affordable. This is a Terrasol brand. So I have a lot of that on hand. I've already added the salt, about 1.5 tablespoons for the size of cabbage that I had. Usually when you do a medium-sized cabbage, it's about 1.5 tablespoons. If you have a really big cabbage, it'll be 2. If you have a really small cabbage, just 1. So I put this in there and I tossed it around, and I've let it sit for about half an hour now. And I'm going to start. My hands are clean. I washed them before this started. I'm going to start massaging the cabbage. So I'm going to put my hands right in there, and you actually just kind of do this. You're trying to draw out the water and start breaking down the cabbage. The fermentation process is already starting. The microorganisms are going to start breaking down the sugars that are in the cabbage. That's what they're going to eat. That's why it's going to be sour cabbage when it's finished. So you do this, I'm not gonna do it for the whole time, but for 5 or 10 minutes. And what you'll see, I don't know if you can see it, but whoops, I'm starting to get liquid that is coming off of my cabbage. And pretty soon, and yeah, I do have a little bit down at the bottom of my bowl, I'll have a little puddle of liquid. And so when you have that little puddle of liquid, you're ready to put it in a jar. How easy is this? So here's my nice clean jar. And I'm going to start putting this in there. And you'll be surprised how much I can get in here because I'm going to start pounding it down. What you're trying to do is to get as much of the air bubbles out. And I'm going to use my fist. I've got a small hand, but if you don't have a small hand, you can use something like a smaller cup or jar or even a mallet or something, because what you want to do is take your hands in there. I don't know if you can see that. And I'm going to be pushing it down with my fist. Now, if you really, and as you do that, more and more of the liquid will be released from the cabbage. If you really get into this the way I do, and I even teach classes and all, you can buy something called a kraut pounder. This is a wooden tool that you can go and push and even get more force, more weight behind it. Now, you saw that that was full. Look how much it's been crushed down. So I'll just keep putting that in, and you'll do that until it reaches about an inch or so below the rim. Because it will expand. The little, my little friends in here are going to be releasing gas as they eat. We're almost ready. It's just too easy. All right. Now, to help this get started a little bit quicker, because normally if you just do cabbage and salt, which you can, it takes many weeks for it to turn into sauerkraut. If you want to give it a jump start, you can use a fourth of a cup of the whey that you strained from your kefir, because it has the microorganisms already in it, so it gives it a jump start. And instead of taking 4 to 6 weeks, it'll take maybe 2. That's how much quicker. So I have already, in just the time, you can see, I've got a little whey there from my kefir that's straining. I'm going to pour that in. And then I'm going to fill it. I'm going to fill it with filtered water until the cabbage is underwater. Okay, here we go. Now it's important while it's fermenting that it remain under the liquid. That will prevent yeast and bacteria from growing. And so I'm going to push this down a little bit. I don't know, can you see that?
Just fine.
Okay, good.
It actually prevents mold. Yeast is going to be present anyway.
Yes, it will, and you don't have to worry about it.
Right.
But I'll talk about that in a second. I have something, because again, I do so much fermenting. I have something called a crock rock. And it's just a piece of glass that I put into the dishwasher so it's sterilized. I'm going to drop that in, and it's going to help keep the cabbage underneath the liquid. So you can kind of see there, it's going to keep that under the liquid. And on top of this, and if you don't have a crock rock, that's fine. You can use one of your outer leaves to save it, tear it, and push that down. But you want to make sure that even the outer leaf is pushed under the liquid so that bacteria won't grow. And it also minimizes the growth of yeast. So I'm going to put on the top of mine what is called an airlock. And this is one type of airlock you can buy. And it comes with the top with a the grommet in the middle, and it also has a ring, one of these silicone rings. And you'll put that on, put this in, and put water in up to the fill line. Well, those were my old ones. And I now have a favorite, a brand new favorite. I got these on Amazon. You can buy them in packs of 3. What it is a silicone top that has a one-way valve on it. That gas can get out, but it can't get in. So I have had perfect. I've never had a batch of sauerkraut not work. And we were talking about bacteria, and this has been cleaned and sterilized. And so I'm just going to put this on top, and you screw it down using the metal rim from the jar. Now, as this ferments, you'll notice that it'll start puffing up almost like a balloon is being blown up. And then maybe the next time you look at it, boom, it's back down. It's because it's releasing the gas through this one-way valve. Now, it's going to take about 10 days to 2 weeks, and then I will taste it. And the way you know sauerkraut is ready is that it tastes like sauerkraut. Now, when you open up the jar, you might see what looks like a film, or what it is yeast. That's not uncommon. What you do is just take a spoon, dump it down the sink. Don't worry about it. It's harmless. One thing you don't want to see is something fuzzy, black or blue growing and having it smell bad, like rotten eggs. Then you know you've got a bad batch. But as I said, I've never had that happen, so I don't really know. That's just what I hear. But when you taste it, if it still tastes salty, it's not ready. So you put the top back on and you let it ferment for a few more days. Usually mine here in Maine, it's cold right now. It's 31 outside. When I woke up this morning, it was about 24. My house is a little bit cooler. It may take, here, because my kitchen's a little cooler than it is during the summer, it might take 2 to even 3 weeks. But again, I taste it every few days after the first 10 days. And when I like the taste, it tastes like sauerkraut. It's ready to go. You take the airlock off of it. You just put the lid on the jar. You put it in the refrigerator, and it will last for 9 months. The thing that's so amazing about sauerkraut and why it's the powerhouse, and is because when you probably have heard about probiotic capsules, and they have like 10 billion, at the time that they were when they were jarred. But the problem is, there's not a whole lot of evidence that all of that gets through your digestive system. God has designed these little critters in such a way that they have a protective coating around the microorganisms that can make it through your digestive acid in your stomach. And so when you have like say a serving of sauerkraut of a half a cup, which I probably would never recommend anybody do if they've never been eating fermented foods. If they're brand new to it, I would say start with 1 tablespoon a day, 2. I actually only eat 2 tablespoons a day, but a half of a cup has many probiotics in it, microorganisms, as an entire bottle of capsules. And you're going to have greater benefit because these little guys can make it through your stomach acid. Another thing that's unbelievable about sauerkraut is a half a cup of just regular cabbage, raw cabbage, is about 40 milligrams of vitamin C. When you turn it into sauerkraut, 1/2 cup has 400 milligrams of vitamin C, 10 times as much. So you're getting more nutrition out of a fermented food than you can in the food in its original state. And that's one reason why fermented foods are so good for the benefit for the health. All right, does anybody have any questions?
I think that's phenomenal. I didn't realize that the sauerkraut was so powerful, but that's great.
Mm-hmm. And the easiest one to make actually are pickles. I'm not going to show you how to do that today. Here are my pickles. These are dill pickles, lacto-fermented dill pickles. But one of the handouts in the file section is the recipe for making lacto-fermented dill pickles using the recipe that I do. So you can make those. These are easy. These do not have as much of microorganisms in it, the probiotic benefit, as the kefir and the sauerkraut. But if you're used to making pickles, this is not made with vinegar. It's made the same way as you would make sauerkraut, except maybe you add some flavoring to it, the pickling spice and garlic, whatever you want to put in it, so they have different flavor. And by the way, in your sauerkraut, if you wanted to, you could put caraway seeds. Donna Schwenk in her books have a wonderful recipe, one called Christmas Kraut, that uses cranberries.
Yeah, I saw that one. That looks wonderful. I also like the one that's got orange and ginger.
Yeah, the orange. I did a class once where we did the orange kraut. Everybody did that. And the only difference was that you took slices of orange and you lined the side of your jar with it. And while it was fermenting, the orange essence got into the flavor of the kraut, which is really, really good.
Nice.
Okay, well, I'm going to run just over and get those books and hold them up for you. And I'll be right back.
While she's doing that, everybody can access all of the files that she's talked about on the Daniel Plan Support Group files.
Mm-hmm. So there you go. These are the two books that I recommend, but it doesn't have to be these two. If you go to your library and look up pickling or fermented foods, you're going to find tons, because this is a hot topic today.
And I have her newest book.
Oh, you've got the newest one. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Good. Very good.
Beautiful demonstration, Catherine. Thank you so much. I'm so excited. I can't wait. My kefir grains arrive on Monday, and I'm looking so forward to actually starting this. I had the mistaken impression this whole time that we've been sharing this platform together in the Daniel Plan, that yogurt and kefir were synonymously powerful. Wow, when you posted 2 weeks ago the difference in those two strains and how much of an impact it had made in your own progress, I thought, wow, this is just an absolute answer to some of my prayers for digestive renewal and my microbiome being restored through leaky gut. This literally heals leaky gut. So I am so excited about the process. I know that it won't be an overnight thing, and I know that the improvements that I've made over the last 3 years have made a massive improvement, a big difference. So I am looking forward to a fairly short period of time for this to actually kick in and take me to the next step. So I'm so excited.
You'll start noticing after, say, 2, maybe 3 months, depending on how bad. I was pretty bad off. I had leaky gut and a lot of food sensitivities, which, by the way, I don't have anymore, except I am celiac. I can't have gluten, but I can have dairy, eggs again, I know that the fermented foods played a huge part in healing my leaky gut.
Right. So here's an interesting thing that Donna mentions in her book, the cultured food, the cultured jar. And this was the most exciting thing for me, because having leaky gut, what winds up happening with leaky gut, in case anybody isn't aware of this, is that undigested particles of food get themselves into your bloodstream, and you have 2 sets of T cells and you have 1 set of K cells. The K cell is a killer cell. The 2 T cells, one is an alerting system and one is a protection system. And when the K cell gets into the system and it's undigested, it can behave like an allergen, even when it's not. So that's how you develop food sensitivities to things like, say, dairy or eggs or grains, in the event that you're not celiac. And so those are the food sensitivities that I have developed through the leaky gut problem. Now, I think some of those leaky gut problems have already been healed, because I'm no longer having symptoms over, I never had a sensitivity to dairy, thank you God. I never used it very much. But now I use it a lot because of yogurt and soon to be kefir. But the thing that I thought that was the most exciting was Donna said that whenever your leaky gut heals and those undigested particles are no longer infiltrating your blood system, now your food sensitivities evaporate and it's digestible, completely beneficial foods that your cells will recognize as the food that they are. So I was like, that was so exciting for me.
Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah, very nice.
A lot of science going on about this right now.
Yeah.
I think, okay, nobody has said this yet, but this is my theory, that they may find that all these chronic illnesses like type 2 diabetes, the first domino to fall is the microbiome, I'm sure.
Oh, I think they already have actually discovered that. I just don't think that that sociology thing where the 100 monkey thing takes place, where after the 100th monkey actually figures out what the first monkey figured out, then everybody in the entire tribe gets it. Well, I think we're close to that. I think that it's become so widespread. It's in paleo, it's in keto, it's in, and we spend $1 billion a year plus as a nation, just in the United States, for diet, health, wellness, et cetera, right? But this is less about diet. This is about lifestyle. And this is the thing that I so appreciate the most about the Daniel Plan, is that it's simply about learning nutrition and surrendering your body for the goodness of God, right? So those are one of the two things that are the most appealing to me in this whole process. Another thing that I did want to share that's along the lines of antigens and negative food sources was this. People that are grain sensitive, and you'll be pretty excited about this too when you hear it, and Donna Shrink shares this in her book also. So sensitivities to grain has come about over the last decade, for lack of a better way to describe it, as a direct result of the change in the farming community for how it's harvested. So there's two things that have happened that are different. The first, of course, is the widespread use of glyphosate in the form of Roundup, where the farmers have been taught to spray their crops with Roundup the week before they harvest, and that kills off the chaff. So that all they're pulling off now is just the grain and the seed. And as soon as the chaff dies, it mass produces seed. So it increases the yield in the produce. That's one thing. So first of all, there's a poisoning going on of the produce that we're consuming. The second thing that happens is the equipment that they use to harvest the product. Prior to this happening, it used to be mowed over, and it would just lay in the field overnight. And then another device would come along and pick it up. And what happened overnight after it was mowed over is that the seed from the wheat shaft itself would sprout because of the dew overnight. And that's no longer happening because it's being combined. So everything's being cut off and scooped up and put into a trailer to go to the mill to be ground. And you can still find organic sprouted product that is treated the old school way. And that's the food or the type of grain, if you choose to consider it, and not everybody can. Celiac obviously certainly cannot. But grain sensitive, once leaky gut is healed, can attempt to use grain that's sprouted again. And so in a month or two after I've been doing this kefir, I very much look forward to giving that a shot because I'm pretty excited about that whole transition. Not that I ever want grain to take the place in my life that it has in the past, because I've enjoyed, living with more fruits and more vegetables. And so that's a really good way to live. But just so that you don't have that limitation, because God is, after all, for abundance. Thank you. That's good. Yeah, it's really good. It's exciting stuff. It is. It is. Whoops. Oh, hi, Mark. Okay, so. Okay, so that's cute. Well, we don't have the ability in the Zoom format to allow our Facebook friends to ask questions at this point. So at this point, we're going to end this seminar, and in a month, we will be doing yogurt that's temperature controlled fermenting or culturing, and we'll be doing kombucha. So we look forward to coming back to you again in a month and sharing more cultured foods and fermented foods for you. And we hope that you guys have enjoyed this. We've enjoyed putting it together for you. And so thank you. Everybody have a great day. And we'll look forward to getting comments and suggestions, ideas later through Facebook. So Catherine, thank you so much for prepping for this. You've done a great job.
You're welcome.
Take care. God bless.
Bye-bye.